Americans, Europeans, and some apple polishers fabricated the myth of nuclear weapons to say that the Islamic Republic was a threat. No, the threat is America itself.
Allowing foreign inspectors to visit your military bases is exactly tantamount to letting them occupy your country.
I'm not particularly concerned about these particular statements that are emanating from Iran. What we're focused on are the ongoing talks to try to resolve the technical details of this agreement.
Liars, dishonest, trickery. None of that bothers the administration?
Well, I would say that you've cited some of the least offensive things we've heard from Iran in the last few weeks.
So the negotiations continue on the nuclear front. Meantime, the U.S. is actively engaged in trying to stop Iran from supplying the Houthi rebels in Yemen. As you take a look at the region, we can report that some U.S. warships, the USS Theodore Roosevelt and also the USS Normandy, joining 8 other U.S. warships in the region, the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, into the Arabian Gulf, and this mission to stop any Iranian vessels that might be carrying weapons to the Houthi rebels. So what about all of this together? Let's bring in our panel. Jonah Goldberg, senior editor at National Review, radio talk show host Laura Ingraham, and Juan Williams, columnist with The Hill. Okay, Jonah, it's a convergence of a lot of things happening at once.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on. I think that sending the troops to intercept is probably a good signal. I think it's also probably a very confusing one to the Iranians these days, because the president's negotiating tactic is sort of like coming out of a cab onto a car dealership and saying, I cannot leave this lot without a car. And, you know, when you say that to a car salesman, they're going to keep racking up the price on you because they know they've got you. Obama, you know, has now admitted that that we are in fact going to, or at least it's been hinted at from the Wall Street Journal, that we are going to give them $50 billion, sort of a signing bonus if they agree to this deal. $50 billion, I did the math, is close to 15% of Iran's GDP. That is a big number, and that is a major sanctions relief. And I think it's going to create huge problems for this deal in Congress, because they were all promised that the sanctions would be lifted in coordination with compliance with the understanding of the framework, and that's clearly not what's happening.
Yeah, Laura, the president met today with UAE Crown Prince Sheikh Mohammed, and they in the Gulf nation states have a real concern about the future of Iran and its expansion efforts, and that is not part of this nuclear negotiation.
It's extremely confusing. Of course, we were almost relying on Iran to take some of the heat off of us and the Iraqi troops. Their training is somewhat in question in resisting ISIS. So we're relying on them somewhat, but then we're negotiating with them on the other hand. And as Jonah pointed out, we're like paying protection money. It's like paying the mob for, we're going to give you 15% of our income this month. Now just don't break our kneecaps. Well, that's a difficult dynamic to keep up. And in the end, look, I think the Obama administration is going to do whatever it can to avoid being a step closer to war, which I think a lot of Americans they don't want to go back to war in the Middle East. They understand that would be also very difficult. But then you see the pictures of Iranian expansion, and that's not good either. So every option seems like a bad option here. And Republicans are going to be left with Hillary probably coming out and saying, well, you might not like what we did, but tell me how you're going to keep Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. Let's hear your plan. And I don't know so far that I've heard a real plan.
Juan, you agree with that?
Well, I think that's true. I think in the immediate sense, that visit from the Crown Prince was very important. The Crown Prince is saying that, in fact, Iran is a destabilizing force and a threat not only to UAE, but think about Saudi Arabia, think about all the neighboring countries in that region. And, of course, we know they are increasingly a major factor in what's going on inside Iraq in terms of the fight against ISIS. So they are promoting the kind of sectarian fight between Shia and Sunni that is destabilizing the entire Middle East. Now we have these warships going in, the United States saying, we apparently are not going to allow you to continue to supply the Houthi rebels in Yemen. Well, again, this is a sort of a surrogate war being waged by the Iranians against who? The Crown Prince, against Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is sending in their own military force at the moment. The United States is going to have to make a decision there. I think in the way that it put Jonah in a box to say, hey, so this is the right move. I think that's a good move, says Jonah. Well, I'm not sure if that is a provocative move in terms of possibly forcing a war with Iran at this moment.
Oh, look, I think it's probably a good move in the simple sense that Obama has done almost everything he can to signal that while he says all options are on the table, he actually doesn't mean all options are on the table. And Iran, when Iran has actually believed that there was a viable military option, if sanctions regime didn't work, Iran's behavior improved, at least at the margins. So at least sending the signal to Iran that, well, at least in the context of this Houthi Yemen stuff, maybe we will send forces, maybe America is willing to use force against Iran. I think that's a good signal. But I think stepping back a little bit, basically what happened here is that, and I'm convinced of this by Mike Duran from the Hudson Institute, a former NSC guy, Iran is determined to be the regional hegemon.
Sure.
And Obama originally wanted to play, as he pulled out of the region, he was going to let Turkey be the regional hegemon. But then the Syria implosion ruined any chance of that, and Turkey no longer wanted to play. And so Obama is just trying to drop Iran into that same role. And the problem with doing that is it creates enormous regional tensions that he does not have any clue about how to deal with.
The region is much less stable than it was 6 years ago. I mean, I know the left is going to be, well, Bush destabilized it. Saddam would have been better off keeping his foot on the lid on the pot that was going to boil over. We know that argument. But every way you turn here, there's another rabbit hole. It's like the House of Mirrors. And you go to the carnival. You go in this direction. Wait, I thought that was the door. And then you go in this direction. Wait, Iran's doing this, but we need them to fight here. We are in a very, very difficult situation. Maybe the best we can ask for are warships right now, because at least that sends some symbolic message. But then if you're not willing to take that extra step toward military engagement, what do the warships mean? So I'm trying to give some kudos to what you're saying and to what Jonah's saying. We're
getting ready for this Gulf Nation summit that the White House will hold, that the president will hold. Do you think that these Gulf nations are going to want something like a treaty that says if we get attacked, you guys protect us, like an Article 5 alliance in NATO? And how is that going to fly?
Well, I think that the United States would likely agree to that. The Obama administration here
has to get through the Senate, but
right. But I think that they would likely be proponents of that. On the theory, and this is something contrary to what the Crown Prince was saying today. The Crown Prince was saying, "Are you opening the door to Iran having nuclear weapons by signing a deal with them that has like a 10-year ticking time frame on it?" And of course, the president thinks, "Are you guys joking? You can't stop Iran from getting a nuclear bomb eventually."
Verification, as you guys have talked about before, means nothing. The verification regime that is even being discussed in hypothetical terms is, as far as I can tell, meaningless. And they mean it to be meaningless.
And yet, why is this administration, I mean, I think you're right. I think Obama thinks that they're going to get a nuclear program, and maybe you can kick the can down the road a little while, and it won't be on his watch, and it'll help him have this détente strategy and all that. But why is John Kerry and this administration constantly talking about this mythical fatwa that says the Iranians don't even want nuclear weapons? No serious person believes that, and yet they are repeating this clear propaganda lie as a way to convince people that this is not that big a deal.
Yeah, the ballistic missiles are just for show. Next up, did Secretary of State Hillary Clinton trade favors for cash, and how will her new campaign handle new questions?